What's going on, everyone? So something that I've talked a lot about is the potential of moving Victor Wembanyama to the four. I just think with his size, as far as weight goes, right? Obviously, he's long, he's lengthy, he's versatile defensively, but I have the concerns, particularly in the West, when you look at the various centers, right? Jokic, Sabonis, even guys like Şengün, Zach Edey's now in the Western Conference, right? So like you have these big bodies that you're playing night in and night out. Do you really want Victor having to match up and bang with the big boys on a nightly basis? And even if, obviously the injury concerns, but beyond that, just the wear and tear that would do for a guy in a Victor Wembanyama. Yes, his size and length really kind of makes up for the lack of, just weight that he carries, but still, like, you don't want to have him on a regular basis have to match up with these huge guys. You can, right? And like if there was a clear cut four, right? Like if, whatever, Giannis became available, right? It's like, okay, like slide Victor to the five and, let's go get Giannis. But that guy isn't available, right? And like, yes, you could go with like a, Jeremy Zohan, but like, I just don't think he's ready yet. Can he get there? Sure, right? But I just think, particularly on the offensive side of things, right, he had his struggles being that, like, the Draymond role at times, right? I just think you stick with the course, stay with the path, and you just continue to allow him to develop, continue to allow him to grow. But if you can get somebody that kind of slots in and be that center that can kind of bang with the big boys, why Victor is able to kind of, one, not only play the power forward position, but I just think defensively, what he could do basically in that free safety scout role is ridiculous, right? Like if he doesn't have to just constantly, and he can just be the blind side, help side defense and also patrol and defend out on the perimeter, and basically the ground that he covers because of his instincts, his size, his length, like all of those factors, you can allow him to kind of play in that scout role. I just think the defense would be even better. And I mean, he already, in my opinion, was the best defensive player in the league last year. I think him and Anthony Davis, I think, are the two clear-cut, like, best defensive bigs in the league. And Victor Wembanyama, what he's going to be able to continue to do, I think is very important. And you also want to protect him and keep him as healthy and least banged up as possible. But the problem is like, what's the center on the market that makes sense, right? You don't want to just get any center because the idea is like you want to get somebody that can match up and have the size at least to bang, right? Like, the beauty is you can kind of get away with not having like an elite defensive center because of how good Victor is defensively. But you'd like a guy that can hold his own and can be the guy that bangs with the other fellas, right? And so to me, it's like you could go with like a Clint Capella or, maybe Valanciunas. Like there's talks that, Valanciunas could potentially be traded at some point this season, that the Wizards, could use him as like a trade asset, right? Maybe get somebody like, but to me, it's like, okay, one, they're older. Two, it's like, are those the best course of action in that regard? And again, you want somebody that can at least hold his own size-wise. And I don't hate the idea. And I know some people might be like, absolutely not. We already went down the path. But I don't hate the idea of bringing in Jakob Poeltl. Right? Like he's got the size, he has the familiarity with the Spurs, right? Like, there was a lot of people that didn't even want the Spurs to get rid of him. He's still young enough to where he can have an impact for the next few years, right? He's also a guy that you can kind of dump the ball down to and let him go to work. He would help with the rebounding, he can help with the shot blocking, and he'd probably be incredibly cheap, right? Because it's not just about being able to go get a center, or you don't want to give up too much value. You don't want to give up too much to where it's like, yeah, we went and got, whoever. Like, we got a Wendell Carter Jr., and it's like, yeah, but he doesn't really have the size to bang, right? Or say you got a Clint Capella, it's like, yeah, he's an expiring contract, but you had to trade, $20 million in salary to get there. Plus, what does Atlanta want? It's just, and look, San Antonio's a team that's never been shy about bringing guys back, right? San Antonio's a team that's brought many guys back, right? Like, so, and I mean, like, DeJounte Murray was on their radar not that long ago, right? And there was like genuine talks about like, hey, like the Spurs may go and land DeJounte Murray, right? So again, like I don't think the Spurs would be opposed to kind of going another round of Jakob Poeltl. Obviously, it comes down to the cost, right? Like what is the cost for a Jakob Poeltl? Because you don't want to end up like now, like you just traded him to Toronto, and then now you're giving up more to get him back, like. Yes, you could argue, well, it was all part of like the grand scheme of things because you were able to get Victor, but still, like I don't hate the idea of like he's a guy that can slot in. I think would work well personally alongside Victor Wembanyama. He's a guy that can bang with the big boys, bang with the big fellas. Right? He has, he can make plays out of the post. He's familiar with the offense, familiar with Pop and the systems and all that stuff. Right? He was solid for them. They didn't really have the team. But now, I mean, you think about it, it's like, man, you have Chris Paul, you have Devin Vassell, you have Harrison Barnes, you have Jakob Poeltl, and you have Victor Wembanyama, right? You got some good versatility, right? Like, Chris Paul's going to make him look like a stud. Like, again, to me, it kind of boils down to what is the cost for Jakob Poeltl? Like, what do you have to give up? And would Toronto even want to necessarily trade him, right? This is just, again, kind of my personal thoughts, kind of surveying the landscape and going like who could potentially be available, who potentially makes sense for the Spurs, right? Like which guy, could you potentially get on a cheaper end that isn't going to break the bank and, would slot in well. And again, I think Jakob Poeltl is a guy that could do that. Now, personally, I'd still prefer a Walker Kessler. Again, he's just younger. He's incredibly versatile. Kind of has a lot of the same skill sets as a Jakob Poeltl. But he just has the upside potential. Fits the Spurs youth, right? And a guy that you can have for now and the long haul. You'd still be able to have like a Jakob Poeltl for a couple of years. But to me, it's like if you can the younger kind of version with the upside and the potential and also cheaper contract, all of that, right? Like, I think that to me would be a no-brainer, right? Like if, let's say Walker Kessler and Jakob Poeltl were the same, I think you go get Walker Kessler all day, like cost-wise, asset-wise, right? But, there's a lot of talks about Utah. They turned down 2 firsts from the Knicks and all that stuff, but, not all picks are created equal, right? Like, Spurs have some pretty interesting and enticing picks that they could, forego if they wanted to get the right piece or if they got somebody that kind of made sense. I also think that there's an argument that at some point, like, you're going to have to start making tough decisions anyway. And it's like, yeah, if you're bringing in and cycling all these young guys, even if you get a handful that work out, eventually you're going to have to pay all those guys or you're going to have to start trading guys, right? So, I mean, if you could get somebody that's like makes sense, young and a foundation piece, then I think you go with that route, right? And that's why Walker Kessler is a guy that I've talked about heavily and kind of mentioned on several occasions because I really think he's a guy that makes a lot of sense. But again, like I do default to Jakob Poeltl, I think is a guy that I think slots in very well alongside Victor and gives you kind of a different skill set, right, in a lot of ways. Now, is he like the absolute best option? No, right? But again, it's about what's available or potentially available, what could be realistic, what could be cheap, right? Like, obviously, it'd be great to go get Jokic or Embiid or something like that, but no, but realistically, it's like, okay, what type of centers can you get to not have to have the wear and tear on Victor and, somebody that isn't, again, going to take away, like, Jakob Poeltl's not going to take away from the guys, right? He's not going to take away from Victor. He's not going to take away from Vassell. He's not going to take away from, Harrison Barnes and Stephon Castle and all these guys, right? Like, to me, it's like if you can turn a whoever, like Zach Collins in picks, or, probably more likely like a Keldon Johnson or something, right? Like, and I don't mean picks like in the sense of a first. I mean, can you take a second or a couple seconds and go do that, right? Like, if you can get the right package and land a Jakob, I just think you could do worse. Right? I think he's a guy that makes sense, slots in nicely. Familiarity, I think, is very important, very key. He's played alongside some of the guys that are still on the roster, and having the two bigs, especially matching up against like teams like Minnesota, right, with Cat and Rudy, right? Like, I think it's something that should at least be explored, right? Like, if Jakob Poeltl does become available, I think if you're San Antonio, at least do your due diligence. Pick up the phone, go, hey, what do you want to send him back, type thing. And if it's not there, then you don't rush it. Because again, the beauty is Victor is capable of playing the 5. I mean, you could argue that he's probably best at the 5, but I just look at it as like, you got to at least try to protect him from the wear and tear. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass a question to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you like the idea of Jakob Poeltl? Do you hate the idea? Do you think it's, like, you kind of indifferent about it? Do you think, like, I wouldn't hate it if it happens, but it's not my favorite? Again, I'd prefer, there's other options I'd prefer, but at what cost? What does that cost is the question. So, and, I look at, I do think that particularly defensively, I think there's a genuine argument that Victor could be better, which is scary, right? Because he doesn't have, now he's just kind of out there patrolling rather than like, I got to kind of stay in this zone. I got to stay in this box to try to, be the deterrent, right? If he can kind of just be everywhere, let him be everywhere. But anyway, again, how you feel, let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.